on Saturday. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, and here is the story tonight. They know that they are facing an onslaught with this Russia investigation and this, quote, deep state intel leaks and backlash, and that the response so far that they have had has been more or less flat-footed to all of this. This team, according to the reports, will work separately from the rest of the White House. They're going to try to clear the decks for those who are focused on work and on legislation pushes. It is likely to look like a war room, similar to the one constructed by the Clinton team during the Lewinsky scandal. This is, they recognize that this is a battle that is going to go on for the duration of the Trump presidency. So who is involved and what is this going to look like in action? Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich joins me in a moment with his take on what is really going on at the White House and what he thinks should go on at the White House. But first, we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, live on the White House lawn, and how they intend to tackle this. Hi, Ed.
Well, Martha, the bottom line is I'm hearing from some of the president's top advisors tonight that he's fed up with all of these attacks. And as soon as he gets back from this foreign trip, he's planning to take the fight to his critics much more aggressively. The president beefing up the White House staff with what you called that war room, basically aimed at getting much tougher on two big issues: pushing back against leakers inside the so-called deep state of the government and dealing with the various investigations of the Russia allegations. Phase one of all of this was the president picking as his outside counsel this tough New York attorney, Mark Kasowitz. One advisor telling me that Kasowitz is, quote, ready to rumble. Phase two of this, the spotlight is now on Dave Bossie and Corey Lewandowski. They are two trusted hands from the Trump campaign who could be, I stress could be, added to the White House staff. Advisors say that both men would prefer to stay on the outside, help the president there, but this is such a critical moment in his presidency that they would be hard-pressed to say no if he asked them directly. In fact, look at how Lewandowski answered the question when our own Tucker Carlson pressed him directly on whether he might join the White House staff for crisis communications.
Well, let me be very clear, and I think everyone knows this. My loyalty is to the president and to make sure that his agenda, which he ran on, and if that means I can help the president by doing that, of course, it would be a privilege. But let me be clear. I've got a great life. I love doing what I'm doing.
Now, this leaves open the question of what happens to Sean Spicer and other top White House aides. I'm told by the president's advisors there's nothing imminent on Spicer or other type aides right now, and that this is more about addition than subtraction in terms of beefing up the White House staff. All of these moves, by the way, are aimed at walling off the president from the investigation so he can focus on the economy, health care. But again, he is going to have to stick to the playbook, not get focused on going off message, as we've seen before, Martha.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. So here now with more tonight, Newt Gingrich joins us on the set, the author of the new book, Understanding Trump, and that goes to a lot of exactly what we're talking about here tonight. So what do you expect when he gets back? He's going to get back on Saturday. What's this offense going to look like?
Well, I don't know yet, and I think the most important person in all this is President Donald Trump. He's coming off of a trip which is historic, a trip where he was disciplined, where he didn't tweet randomly, where Spicer wasn't holding various press gaggles. They stuck to the messages they wanted to send. They established a disciplined, planned approach. If the president comes home and remains disciplined, if he's willing to be the leader of a team rather than just somebody who goes off on his own whenever he feels like it, he could become very formidable. And my advice to him then would be, you get a guy the caliber of a Dave Bossie and a Corey Lewandowski, let them do the fighting. You go out and talk about jobs, you talk about health care, you talk about infrastructure, you bring the country together. You're the positive creator of these things, and stick within the boundaries of working with the team, and don't get off on all this stuff. I mean,
sounds just like Donald Trump, just like Donald Trump.
Well, he's got a big, I mean, this is a big decision.
But let me take you through a scenario, because here's what's going to happen. After he gets back, we're going to see James Comey testify. It's not going to happen as quickly as we thought, right? So he will testify. We know that one of the big problems was when he started to speak out about his side of the story, the president kept poking the bear, calling him a nut job, you know, calling him names behind his back. So this time he's going to have to rein that in. He's going to have to say, I'm not going to address this.
Look,
this is a matter.
I have two
Is he going to do that?
I have two pieces of radical advice. One, turn off the television. Yeah. Because
he has them everywhere, as you know.
Well, and Trump reacts to it. I mean, it's fine to look at it for information. It's really self-destructive to allow yourself to dance to their tune. Two, when you have one channel that's 93-7 negative, according to the Harvard study, Cancel the daily press briefings. These people are not reporters, they're attackers. Why would you give them an hour every day to try to figure out clever ways to attack Spicer? It doesn't get you on message.
That's a good point. How do you think that's going to look? Because I think we all know you can't.
Who cares?
You can cancel the daily press briefing, but I don't know that that's a good approach. But do you see fewer news conferences? Do you see him come out a little bit more often and address issues?
Why do it as a news conference? If he wants to give a speech, give a speech. If he wants to go on Facebook, go on Facebook. If he wants to sit in the Oval Office and talk to the American nation, presidents can make news.
But he handles it well when he gets out there and answers questions with the press.
He does handle it well, but he doesn't necessarily handle it well on his topics. I mean, it doesn't help him to be tactically clever on a topic that gets him off. And his topics are simple. We need to pass health care. We need to create jobs. We need to build infrastructure. We need to cut back on red tape. He needs to remember what messages he's trying to send and measure his weekly performance against getting across his messages.
Necessarily in reaction mode.
The fact that he's able to beat these folks, which he can, I mean, no question in my mind, Donald Trump versus 10 or 15 reporters is not a fair fight. He'll just beat them. But he doesn't necessarily beat them in a way that helps him.
Let me ask you one more question, because you know the Hill better than anyone. I spoke to Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, the other day, and I pressed him a little bit on whether or not the GOP was going to stand by the president through all of this. And he was very non-committal. Here's what he said.
I have no idea what these investigations are going to produce because they just got started. So I'm not going to prejudge where this independent investigation is going to go as it follows its facts. There's one in the House, there's one in the Senate, and then there's the FBI one.
What do you think?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's reasonable to suggest that none of this in the end is going to involve Trump personally. I mean, I think it's, you know, Reagan got through Iran-Contra. Nobody thought it involved him personally. This is not like some of the other problems. Second, the Republicans need to understand something. They're going to lose the House if they get involved in a civil war over President Trump. And I think the idea of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker in 2019 should sober every Republican in the country. They need to fight among themselves less. They need to fight with the Democrats more. And they need to understand they had better be one team or they're going to be a minority.
One last question for you. The latest story, because there seems to be something that drops pretty much every night around this time, is that Jared Kushner is the only person who's a current part of the administration that is a person that they're interested in with regard to this investigation because of meetings that he had in December with Russian bankers and Russian officials. Your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is, did they have a single named source for the story? Is there a single person? This is the Washington Post that's most disgusting. Do they have anybody who's willing to go on record and say yes?
Well, I think it's just, you know, based on the meetings that were had, they would like to discuss with him what was discussed.
First of all, I think he was assigned the job of meeting with people by the president-elect. So guess what? He met with people. My question, though, is when you see these kind of stories, as you point out, that happen to crop up every day, either in the Washington Post, the New York Times, they play, you know, ping pong. They say, unknown sources have told us today. I find that, frankly, sickening. These people, you know, you have a president on a great, amazing, historic tour. He was very successful today with NATO. He was very successful with the Pope yesterday. He was unbelievably historic in Riyadh with 58 leaders. But 3 unnamed sources this afternoon having a drink with a Washington Post reporter secretly leaked. How do you know any of it's true? And furthermore, if it's from Mueller's investigation, he should be enraged and he ought to lock somebody up. I mean, the people who leaked the British story were not in the White House. They were in the intelligence community, and they ought to go to jail.
We're going to get to that in just a little while. Newt, thank you. Good to have you with us tonight. Thanks for coming by. So in a uniquely Trumpian speech that Newt Gingrich just mentioned at NATO earlier today that had European leaders sort of tittering on the sidelines, the president slammed the weakening of this organization in recent years and said it's only an alliance if everybody pays and everybody stands up to terrorism. He was scoffed at roundly by many in the media. So is Charles Krauthammer scoffing or is he praising? He's coming up next. Also, as police ramp up the hunt for more accomplices and potential plots in the wake of the Manchester massacre, hear why hospital trauma units are now on standby in England tonight. Plus, a straight-A Christian high school student banned from attending graduation because she is pregnant. She is here to tell us why she is fighting back.
I know it's been really hard to still accomplish all my goals and all my dreams, but I get to have a little guy following right next to me, and we get to do it together.
President Trump took his first NATO summit by storm today as shocked European leaders looked on. He called on nearly 24 of our closest allies to pay their fair share towards defense in their countries. Critics called it ill-timed scolding, while supporters cheer this type of straight talk as long overdue.
I have been very, very direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and members of the alliance in saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense. Over the last 8 years, the United States spent more on defense than all other NATO countries combined.
And you, and you, and you, and you. He might as well have been pointing down the line there. Dr. Charles Krauthammer, nationally syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor, joins us now. Charles, good to have you here tonight.
Good to be here.
What did you make of that moment?
Well, I think we're looking at the wrong thing. I think the scolding was unnecessary, although it has a long history. American congressional leaders going back to the 50s have complained about NATO's lack of contribution, lack of support. There's nothing new there. But what was new, and I think the real headline was, that after everything had been teed up for the President of the United States to reassure NATO that we would stand with them, the President refused to say the simple phrase, "We will honor Article 5, which is that if one of us is attacked, all of us is attacked." And the fact that he was speaking at a ceremony to commemorate the fact that it's only been invoked once, when the European states,
which he pointed out,
declared, he pointed it out, but that's not why he was there, to remember some history. The reason he was there was because he campaigned talking ambivalently about NATO, saying it was obsolete, threatening American withdrawal. He had sent his surrogates to Europe to say, oh yes, of course we're going to honor Article 5. He didn't say it. It's the omission that is the huge news here, and it's fairly incomprehensible because it means that whatever deterrent exists from the United States is thereby weakened by simply not saying the phrase everybody was waiting for.
All right. But let me posit this. This is a president who, everybody knew what the attitude was going to be when he arrived there, right? I mean, he spoke a lot about what he saw as the shortcomings of NATO. And you have them all lined up there. They have not done, it's an alliance. So an alliance means that it's an agreement. Part of the agreement is that everybody finds a way in the budget of their country to carve out enough money to give 2% towards their own defense so that the alliance works, right? The other part of this alliance that has been missing in the minds of many people is that they have been attacked time and time again by Islamic radical terrorists. They've lost hundreds of people on their own soil. And so he got three things. He got them to sort of come towards the idea of paying their fair share. He got them to agree to better intelligence sharing in a new unit that they said that they would construct. And he got them to agree to be part of this coalition that will fight ISIS as a group. So, do you not see those as small victories at the very least?
Small, extremely small, and very symbolic, very little substance. NATO was not constructed to fight terrorism.
But that happens to be the where we live right now. I mean, that's the threat that faces them that is more immediate than any other.
It's not the most immediate. The most immediate is a Russia that's on patrol, that's on the prowl, that has invaded Georgia and detached 2 provinces, invaded Ukraine, detached the Crimea, annexed it, has all these threatening gestures towards Eastern Europe. Estonia is defenseless if the Russians decide to take it over.
But if you talk about strengthening NATO, aren't you talking about strengthening NATO on that front as well? I mean, Russia does not want to hear that we are encouraging everybody to pay their fair share and that we're looking to strengthen NATO because they know what that means, no?
We're talking about a relatively trivial difference. We're talking about roughly $100 billion. The GDP combined of NATO is about $30 trillion. That $100 billion is not going to make a dime's worth of difference if there's any invasion. What makes a difference, what deters the Russians, is not that Estonia, which happens to pay 2%, will pay 2.5%, which will get you lunch.
No, but it is symbolic, and that symbolic is important. It's pay-in, it's commitment, it's understanding that you are in this together, that you are part of an alliance when you make sacrifices at home in order to do what you promised you would do to be part of that very important alliance.
Look, we have had this chronic problem of America paying an unfair share since the founding of NATO in the 40s. There is nothing new here. And yet through all that time, when we had to bear the unfair burden, if you want to put it in Trump's terms, which was protested, particularly in Congress for decades, all that time we prevented, A, a nuclear war, and second, Russia marching into Western Europe, and we preserved a continent. We, in fact, liberated the eastern half of that by means of NATO. That's what NATO did, fair share or not. I don't oppose getting the others to pony up, but it makes no real difference. It's a very narrow view of NATO. And right now, what's important is not to turn it into an anti-terror instrument. It's the clumsiest way to do it. Anyway, all of the 28 nations are in the anti-ISIS alliances as nations. So now what's happened with Trump's trip, NATO as an institution is going to be part of it. That will not change anything. And just beside the point, the one thing that Trump overlooks, the NATO nations are represented in Afghanistan. Many of them have a higher per capita loss of their soldiers than we do. So the idea that they haven't lifted a finger to fight terrorism is simply wrong.
All right. Charles, thank you. It's an interesting debate.
Strong letter to follow.
All right. Thank you very much, Charles Krauthammer. Always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much. So coming up here tonight, a Republican congressional candidate, you may have heard, facing criminal charges for something he did just hours before he was about to most likely win an election. Our reporter saw it all happen with her own eyes, and she will explain exactly what went down in that room. Then, President Trump moving quickly to repair ties with the British after intelligence leaks related to the Manchester bombing threatened that special relationship, but there's breaking news on that tonight, and we will bring it to you. Mark Thiessen and Zach Buchanan on all of this coming up after the break. Murdered children and their parents at a concert in Manchester, England. The British authorities are warning every single UK hospital to, quote, prepare for a further incident. Investigators say that they discovered a bomb factory in the home of the killer and that there was more material for bomb making that was not there and that was in the room. And all of that has raised a lot of fears that somewhere out there could be another bomb that's ready to go. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal joins us once again this evening live from Manchester. Rick.
And Martha, off the top, we want to share some new video with you that we obtained from Sky News. Sky News can confirm that this is the home of that Salman Abedi shared with his family, and the video shows a man believed to be Salman Abedi taking out the trash. So it's a bit strange. It's this person walking outside and putting rubbish in a canister here in Manchester. Again, can't confirm 100% that this is Salman, but people who've seen it say they believe it is. And Sky News has confirmed that this is his home. It's just a piece of video that surfaced of this man who was believed to have carried out Monday night's terror attack. And of course, the investigation into this attack remains at a very high pace. Police have been carrying out raids across the city and across the suburbs, including one about 40 minutes north of us in the town of Wigan tonight. And that led to the evacuation of the neighborhood when the police found what they believe were suspicious materials inside the home. They called in the bomb disposal team. Eventually, they lifted the cordon and allowed the neighbors to come back, but the investigators remained on scene. And police tell us that all of these raids, or many of these raids, have actually resulted in compelling and important clues. And they say that the arrests of 8 people in the UK so far have been significant. Those arrested include the suspect Salman Abedi's older brother here in Manchester, his father and younger brother arrested in Tripoli, Libya, where authorities say the 18-year-old brother Hashim confessed to knowledge of the plot and said that he and Salman belonged to ISIS. Authorities say that Salman may have gotten terror training in Syria, but they're also very concerned about leaks of the investigation to the American press, including the suspect's name and evidence photos of the bomb aftermath that were published in the New York Times. That led to a lid on info sharing between Manchester police and U.S. authorities. We are told tonight that the lid, Martha, has been lifted, that the British authorities got reassurances from the U.S. That those leaks would be clamped. And President Trump has also asked the Justice Department for a thorough investigation of this. But again, we're told the lid has been lifted, and these two sides are now sharing information again.
Well, that's good news. Rick, thank you very much. So as Rick has just reported, the U.S. and the UK are sharing intelligence again about the terror attack. Here for more on all of this tonight, Mark Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and a Fox News contributor, and Zach Pecanis is a former senior DNC advisor and a Clinton campaign aide. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. You know, there's so much that we're learning in this case. Reports today that he called his mother and said, "Forgive me," on the phone just shortly before he went in there and killed parents who were waiting for their children, killed children who were waiting for their parents. I mean, it is an absolutely horrific crime. We also know that there were several attempts by the Muslim community that he lived in to put up red flags on him. People contacted the Libyan Muslim community leader, contacted the National Counterterrorism Hotline and said, "We're concerned about him. He's expressing militant viewpoints." And then an imam at the Didsbury Mosque did the same thing. So we have a couple things to take on here. Mark, let me first ask you about this intelligence sharing and the photos that surfaced in the New York Times and CBS, which the Trump presidency, got some backlash for. Is that justified?
It's not President Trump's fault that it happened, but I understand why the British are upset. They have every right to be upset. I mean, if you think about it, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 major leaks that have, A, burned 2 major allies, UK and Israel, as sources of intelligence on ISIS, and B, helped ISIS by giving them information about sources and methods of how we collect intelligence. The leak of the fact that Israel was behind the intelligence we had on an ISIS plot to blow up planes using bombs on computer hard drives, and now this information about not just the photos of the bomb, but the name of the bomber. I mean, these are intelligence trails that our intelligence community has to follow in order to find out if there's an entire network behind this. They may have other plots. They may have plots for the United States or against U.S. interests in the world. We need to keep those intelligence trails warm, and leaks are incredibly damaging to that.
I mean, the indication that we have is that the FBI and the New York Police Department, who has a base in London, were the people who had these photographs. It was not necessarily intelligence, but it was photographs that they didn't want to get out. And as you point out, it demonstrates the materials that were used in this, and they didn't want that to go out there. You know, Zach, how did that end up being, something that was designed, that sort of reflected poorly on the administration?
Well, look, I mean, I agree with Mark. I mean, this is the second time in a month in which this administration has leaked information from some of our key allies and has alienated both of them. First, Israel, when he leaked highly classified information to the Russians that actually put an Israeli spy who was undercover and infiltrated ISIS in danger. And now we have him having to go on.
Have been voting for the past almost 4 weeks now.